Hello, everyone. Welcome to this momentous day as we have finally reached our last set of notes for this textbook and the day before spring break. So this is an exciting time to look at the continuity and changes in a globalized world. Most of what we're going to be talking about today are changes, and I think there might be like one continuity in this whole PowerPoint. So this is basically a summary of the 1900s and all of the changes that have taken place. Much of this we have talked about before, so hopefully this will be review to you. One of the scientific things that happened in the 1900s was people became increasingly interested in debating the origin of the universe. Much of the West had accepted creationism prior to Charles Darwin's evolution theory, but more people in the 1900s began to adhere to the Big Bang theory. And according to this theory, the universe started with one single cosmic event. There was a single-celled organism, a bang happened, and things began to explode. And this, how I feel about this. So we'll move on, but the Big Bang Theory is popular. All right, so knowledge of wave science led to the development of things like the radio, the microwave, and then later, also cellular communications and faster internet service, which is always mind-blowing to me. I don't understand the science behind airwaves and how we can have internet because of invisible waves in the air, but I do appreciate it, and I think it is awesome that we have it. Okay, knowledge of germs and diseases have led to cures for common diseases and vaccines for common diseases like tuberculosis, polio, tetanus, all sorts of vaccine. Like we said, one of the things that is more recently being discovered is the malaria vaccine, which they have in the trial stages. So that would be really good, especially for the continent of Africa. But even new treatments for chronic diseases like cancer and arthritis, not to mention antibiotics like penicillin, help prevent infections and help people recover more quickly from infections. We said that once penicillin was invented, so many soldiers were saved who would have previously died because of a simple infection or like a gunshot wound or something like that. All right, so energy technology led to greater productivity and faster shipping because of advances that allow us to extract and produce oil more quickly, and because not only oil, but also nuclear power, and then more knowledge about how to use wind power and solar power and like renewable resources have led to machines that work faster, produce more, and they give us transportation technologies that will allow goods to be shipped faster. So energy technologies don't just impact manufacturing, but it also impacts how fast we can ship the goods that are manufactured. Communication technology has led to mass communication and mass global transfer of information with the telegraph and then the telephone and then cell phones and internet communication. And of course, internet and cell phones have replaced older forms of communication that allow us to communicate instantly with anyone in the entire world who has a cell phone or the internet. All right, agricultural technology in the 1900s led to the Green Revolution. We talked a lot about GMOs last year, genetically modified organisms, but basically we have these seeds that are resistant to insecticides and herbicides and just about anything. And they also, many of them will produce or harvest more quickly than regular seeds. And so the Green Revolution is the expanded use of GMOs and these seeds that are resistant to just about anything that could kill it environmentally. Because of these seeds, we have higher production rates for food, which allows us to accommodate a greater population, especially within developing countries. There's a lot of debate about this, whether developing countries, African countries in particular, should use GMOs because their primary market is Europe. And I don't know if you know how Europe feels about GMOs, but European products must be labeled if there are any genetically modified ingredients. And so if Africa switched to these seeds, these GMOs, then their primary market would probably stop buying from them. European countries would probably stop buying from them. So a lot of debate there, but GMOs do produce a lot, and they are resistant to pests and Roundup. They're called Roundup Ready seeds, so they are pretty resilient. All right, so looking at the changes that these technologies have caused, like I said, there might be one continuity in here. Most of this is changes. So social changes, one of the most significant changes is that the world's population has grown faster than at any previous time in human history. Because of this increased population, that puts a strain on all sorts of things. It puts a strain on the political system and on cities' infrastructures and on existing social orders. And so the most of this growth is actually in developing countries because of the birth control that is available in developed countries. Population growth has greatly tapered off. And in some places like Japan, there's a population decline. But most of this growth is taking place in developing countries. With that, we've talked already about transportation technologies and energy technologies. There's this thing called brain drain. This is another AP Hug term. But brain drain is when the most intelligent people of a country leave and go somewhere else. And so, like in California, there are many Asians who have migrated from their countries, from China or Japan or South Korea, to work in the United States as doctors or engineers. But it's called brain drain because the most intelligent people in a society leave. And because we have better transportation technologies, it has allowed that. With that is chain migration. And chain migration is when the family comes with the person. So like if you have like a world-renowned Chinese doctor and he moves to the United States, that would be brain drain. And then if his family comes with him, that would be chain migration. Another significant social change that has taken place since 1900 is that women have had more opportunities because of the right to vote. Because they can control the size of their family with birth control, women have taken on some of the highest political offices and have held positions and taken on careers that were previously only available to men. All right, economic changes that have taken place. We spent a whole section talking about this, but economic globalization has greatly intensified since 1900. And this is just the process of the world becoming smaller, so to speak, economically. So like if I wanted a product from Japan, I could order it on Amazon or something like that, and it would be here in like 2 weeks. So the world is, in a sense, becoming smaller in that we can buy and sell goods all over the world. This is the one continuity I was talking about. So developed nations have continued to exploit developing countries for raw materials and new markets. This has been going on since the 1500s. We talked about the age of exploration, the Columbian Exchange, the Spanish and the English and the French setting up colonies around the world. And then exploiting them for raw materials like cotton or tobacco or sugar, and then selling their manufactured products to these colonists. So that is a continuity. Another change is that Western dominance. So like the United States is number one economically, and many Western European nations are dominant as well. But that Western dominance has recently been challenged by some Asian countries like South Korea, like Taiwan, Singapore, and even China recently. So after Mao Zedong died, the government began to relax its economic control over China. And since then, China has become the second largest economy in the world after us. And they are a major exporter. Like I said yesterday, if you go to Walmart, just about everything in there is made in China. India also has become powerful economically because they have really taken on software development, like that's become their thing. And so they have a highly specialized labor force that creates software, and also engineering is their other thing. But India has increased their dominance economically. So political changes that have taken place. This has occurred primarily through mass protest movements. All sorts of things have been protested since 1900. Many of them have been successful in bringing about political change. One of the earliest examples of non-violent resistance was in India. Remember Gandhi and the Indian National Congress pushing for independence from Great Britain, and they did so using non-violent methods, which inspired people like Martin Luther King and activists who championed civil rights in the United States. Anti-war protests were really popular, especially in the 60s and 70s because of Vietnam. Women's rights movement has been really popularly protested. Things like equal pay and gender equality and access to birth control and things like that. In South Africa, they've protested the apartheid, which now that's been removed. But protests against the apartheid were successful because it did successfully end racial segregation in South Africa. Governments in some places were sometimes slow to respond to these protests and these calls for change. And in some cases, the government didn't really listen to these protests at all, and instead, they lashed out against protesters, or they threw them in prison, or they killed them. Think back to China and I can never say it, but the Tiananmen Square, whatever it is, I can't. But they wanted more democratic measures in China, and the Communist Party was not ready for that. And so they called soldiers in to fire on the crowd, and, estimated thousands of people were killed trying to protest peacefully. Another significant change, which this one is economic as well, there's been sort of a decline in laissez-faire economics. Remember, Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations writes about how the government should take its hands off of the economy. That's what laissez-faire is Latin for. It's this hands-off approach to the economy. Well, since 1900, the government has begun to take on a more active role in regulating the economy with things like minimum wage laws and OSHA. I don't know if you can hear the train in the background. I hope you can, because it's awesome. It goes by every day, sometime in the afternoon between like 12 and... All right, cultural changes. So some cultural changes that have taken place since 1900. The main one is simply the increased interaction, the process of globalization. Not only can we buy and sell products all over the world, we have access to different cultures all over the world. Typically, though, people have a preference for Western culture. In our old world history class, one of the terms that was in bold was it's like Coca-Colanization or something like that. But it was the idea that people were buying into American culture, which was symbolized by Coke, probably the most profitable product at the time. But this is still true. People still consume Western and United States movies and television shows and music and things like that. Another cultural change that has taken place is that fashion styles spread quickly. A new fashion that appears in one place will quickly be imitated and adopted elsewhere and become popular almost overnight. And another cool thing is that many cultures are celebrated. So think about if you have like a family movie night in your home, which we often do. On the last one, we watched The Odd Life of Timothy Green, which consisted, as far as I know, entirely of American actors and was produced by Hollywood. But we ordered Chinese takeout. And so there's a celebration not just of US culture, but of many culture. Anytime you go to a Mexican restaurant or a Chinese restaurant or you go to Ichiban, that's a celebration of another culture. All right. And then lastly, looking at environmental changes. Because of the airplane, travel times around the globe are so much shorter. You can get from one side of the globe to another in a matter of hours or days rather than several months. Because of extraction technology, oil is more easily and more quickly and safely extracted. So that makes oil cheaper. And extraction technologies have actually found more oil in the earth as well. So there's more of it. Not only is it cheaper, but there's more of it. Also, the space age has kind of broken our limits on what we thought was possible in terms of space exploration, but we landed a man on the moon first, which is pretty awesome, and certainly gave us a lead in the space race against the Soviet Union in 1969. So go US. And then lastly, the harmful thing that, like the harmful change to the environment, has been in the form of air and water pollution. Air pollution is increased anytime we burn fossil fuels. So factories running machines that operate on oil or natural gas, cars, our homes, many of them run on natural gas. And when we use those things, it puts pollution in the air. And then we also have homes, people, companies dumping all sorts of waste into the water and oceans and lakes. And so it's kind of given rise to this debate about global warming and what the cause of that is, which most people say pollution is a significant cause of climate change. All right, we are done. Send me a picture of your notes, and I hope you have an awesome spring break.